the airline. I had to call the people in Berlin. I was like, is there any way I could book my ticket and everything else a day later? Because I literally have to fly across the country to the other state to get my passport and then fly back here and then fly out on the next day, hopefully.
Welcome to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, your gateway to becoming a thought leader in your field. Dive into the world of elite podcasting and master the art of influence and inspiration. And now, podcast personality, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Hi, welcome back again to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I am your Podcast Maestro, Anne Scottlin, and I'm so glad to have you with us here today, where we are going to talk about the next episode in my Podcast Power Playbook. And this episode is about how to dominate your niche, so you're definitely going to want to stick around for that. But before you do that, please like, subscribe, drop this link to someone who might love to join us in here either now or once this is finished. They can use the same link to watch the show. So thank you for your comments and questions. I always get excited when those come in. So getting right to it. So last episode, we talked about defining your brand identity and how important that is from the overall identity, whether it matches your business, whether it's separate, whether they need to be complementary, or if they're fine being independent. How do your things as simple and important as your color schemes help classify your space as your own, giving you a particular voice in your field. So if you missed that one, you might want to go back and check it out because there's a lot of really, really good things in there. And part of the point of consistency, which is part of what we're going to talk about today in dominating your niche, is really building that loyal audience, because audiences are loyal for several reasons, but one of the big ones is when they tune in, they always know what they're going to get. They don't necessarily know exactly what it's going to be about, but they know what they're going to get, and they know they're not going to go away disappointed or disenchanted or hear something they weren't expecting at all. So we're going to give you some examples of that and some amazing tips just for you on how you can bring that consistency to your own show, whether you're doing it on your own or whether you're someone I'm working with. These will be points that you're going to be really appreciate to have. So consistency is such a weird word, right? Like everyone, I don't know, the first word that always comes to mind, the first thought about consistency is like going to the gym. And you're like, ugh. I think that's more of an illustration of lack of consistency. If you get that ugh feeling, that's because you don't go enough. If you're like, yeah, that's amazing, then that's good consistency. I was trying to think of what are some areas in my life in general where I tend to be really consistent and what happens when I don't be. And I was just thinking, because about 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready to go out of the country. I was going on a business trip to Berlin, and I had my passport, my travel bag, my everything packed. I'm a huge advanced packer. I'm very particular about everything. I know where everything I keep all the time, where all my secret compartments are, where my passport always is. And I was just about ready to go. So I was flying out the next morning. And then I said, oh, you know what? I'm just going to get my passport out and put it with my purse. I'll take it out of my secret spot where I usually store it. Well, I am in another state right now, and I have been for a few weeks working. And when I went to my secret passport place, I realized it wasn't there. It was at home in the other state. And you cannot fly without a passport. It doesn't matter if you have a passport card, that works for like domestic flights. No, you actually have to have your real paper book passport. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? I have appointments. So I had to call the airline. I had to call the people in Berlin. I was like, is there any way I could book my ticket and everything else a day later? Because I literally have to fly across the country to the other state to get my passport and then fly back here and then fly out on the next day, hopefully. And after much complications, they said that could work out and we could do that. So I literally had to fly out of state, go home, get my passport, fly back all in one day, and then get ready to, again, try to leave the country, which worked that time. But it's one of those things, whenever you're inconsistent, it throws a major hang up in your plans. If that wasn't a major hang up, I don't know what. You don't know the panic associated with all that. I should have told the story with all the spice that really involved, which was absolutely freaking out. Oh my gosh, I'm going to miss my flight. They won't let me on the flight. What about the people waiting for me in Germany and have me scheduled for stuff? And what can I fix that? Will they change the schedule? What if the airline's out of seats? What if I can't get the same? I mean, just on and on and on. And the cost and money, I think just the round trip flight, everything cost me, was close to $750 to $1,000 by the time I had to buy a last minute ticket home and back, and then also pay the adjustment for fees for my international travel. So when you aren't consistent, not that we don't make mistakes, but when we're not consistent, there's a price to pay. And, just having your audience always know that you're going to show up and you're going to deliver is hugely important. And it's like if you don't have your passport, if you show up at the airport and you're like, oh, I don't have a passport, they're like, well, see ya. Anyway, so this is just more about consistency in your actual week-to-week behavior in your podcast. And that includes your consistent format. That includes your tone and your style and even how you name your episodes. What? Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So first of all, your format consistency. What does that mean, format consistency? Well, it's pretty much having a predictable. I just love how I'm talking today. Having a predictable structure for your episode. So the audience knows what you're going to start with, what the middle is going to be like, what kind of examples you tend to give, what the end is going to be like. So there's like a comfortable progression of your episode. Just think of your favorite TV show, right? If you don't hear that entry song that you're always used to, the theme song, if you don't see the commercial clips at the regular spaces, if you don't see the credits where they normally are, it throws you off and you feel funny. And instead of just sinking into that normal comfort zone, you're like, hey, wait, they changed this. Or are you one of those people who gets really annoyed when they change things on shows? Like in the next season, they change up not only the picture, but sometimes a lot of other elements. And you're just like, no, this is not what I signed up for. So consistency, you want to satisfy your audience's expectations. You want to have professional appeal so they always know what they're going to get. So one of those easy ways to do it is, I should have played my intro here, memorable intros and outros. So I've been using this music that I use for a long time. People identify it with me. It's copyrighted, personally copyrighted music, so that I won't have anyone ever complain that I have stolen their content. Because as you know, a lot of stuff on YouTube and everywhere else that says uncopyrighted music material is fine, even if it is uncopyrighted, if it's been used by any other person on, say, YouTube or elsewhere, it's flagged as not being your own. So if someone else tried to use my theme music, they would probably be flagged, not because I personally flagged them or complained, but because the algorithm would say, hey, this is already out on the net somewhere that's not affiliated with your name. This isn't your music. I had a huge problem with that a few years back on one of my earlier podcasts, where every single week when I would put it out on some of the platforms was no problem, of course, but on YouTube, it would get flagged and paused every single week. And every week, without fail, I would have to send this notification back. I have written for permission from the person who created this music. It is not copyrighted. I have permission in writing. Here's a copy. And they would release it. But is that really what you want to be doing every single week? And then you also run the risk. What if you end up airing it or a replay on a new platform that catches it and spots it again and gives you a heck of a lot of problems for it? So you want to avoid that. But you do want your intro to be memorable. So, for example, the popular podcast Serial, I don't know if you know that one. Every single episode opens with this distinctive, suspenseful theme music, Sarah Koenig's show. And it has this tone that is set for all this investigating storytelling that follows, right? It sets the mood. And you're like, it's like that theme song on your favorite show. And also her episodes conclude with that same memorable theme music. And they always have a brief teaser for what's coming next time. So your listeners and viewers are like, oh yeah, waiting for the next installment. And I just want to throw that in there. So a lot of times I will use the word listeners on the show to describe your listeners, but also your viewers. So podcasting in its original form, of course, an audio-only platform, also still extremely popular as audio only, but there is a big trend of video podcasting being much, much more audience friendly. And I think I say this every week, but I'm going to say it again, because when you have an audio only show, everyone can listen to it, but no one can watch it if they feel like it. They can't see you, interact with you. I'm a very visual person. Like I really get a lot out of people's gestures and facial movement and expression in their eyes. Like that makes a huge difference for me into how I enjoy a show. But the reverse is better. If you have a video podcast, it can always be an audio podcast too, which is how this podcast and all my other ones are as well. So just a tip for you. So on your intros and outros with your music, keep it short. Make sure your music is branded to you and your sound effects, and make sure that your welcome messages are really, really consistent. So the other thing I want to talk about was segment structure. At least that's another important part of maintaining consistent format. And this is just like The Daily with Michael Barbaro at the New York Times, right? Very, very popular podcast, The Daily, really good show. I sure enjoy it. And it focuses, if you don't know it well already, on a single major news story of the day. And Michael's segments are really consistent. Again, it's like this, it's like walking into your favorite restaurant or bar, or coffee shop, where there's just like this vibe, like, I'm in a space that I can just space out, relax. If you're driving, if you're drinking a cup of tea or coffee, if you're whatever, it's just like, I'm in the Daily space, or I'm in the Anne Scottlin space. I'm in the Podcast Maestro space. So what is the energy of it? So Michael always starts that show with a brief overview of the day's main story, as you probably know, and it really kind of sets the stage for what you can expect. Then he gives you that main story, and it always includes a real deep dive format, like specialists, experts, people at the top of their game who know the most about what's being discussed. And then in his closing remarks, he summarizes the key points, as we always should. And then he even gives a brief update on other important news. How nice is that? Let's say you've spaced out that day and you haven't even actually seen the headlines. So first you hear the most important story, which is why you go. So you're not disappointed by having all that clutter news at the beginning, but at the end, you get a little update on the news or anything that might have changed very, very recently, so that you know what's going on in the world. So try to keep your introduction, your main body, your closing remarks similar. It really does help kind of create that vibe that is your show. It is the vibe of a consistent format. And as we started out talking about, the whole show today is about consistency. And by being consistent is one of the major ways to dominate your niche. And you can see some of these very popular podcasts that do that. Extremely predictable and consistent. And sometimes, even if you're a PG-13 talk show podcast and, not so much like this show, but, you're wearing your sweats and your backwards hats and all the good stuff, right? You're having a blast, you're goofing around. Even that, people are coming for the consistency, because it might be part of the consistency that your mood is inconsistent and that you tell different kinds of jokes, but overall people still come away with the laugh, the entertainment, the, oh my gosh, look what he's up to today feeling. So keep consistent. Use that music, use your sound effects, even your catchphrases. Most of the big podcasts, if you know them well, have a catchphrases that they use. So maybe think about, this could be fun for the creatives out there. What are some of the catchphrases you might like to use to just make your show even more identifiable to you? And so let's take a break here and talk just for a moment on tone and style. What is the difference between the tone and style and just maintaining consistent format? Well, we've kind of talked about that a little bit already, but it's that vibe, the overall vibe that we've already talked about. It's helping build your brand identity. It's keeping your listeners really connected and clear on what you do. This is, again, such a great crossover episode between what we talked about in our last week, which was branding, and this week, which is consistency. So what do you mean by tone? Okay, let's say, what tone is the Joe Rogan Experience? Casual, right? Conversational, relaxed. What about Freakonomics Radio? Professional, very informative, formal. And then Comedy Big Bang, right? Comedic, lighthearted, humorous, like just, that's what the tone is. So what's the tone here? What would you say? You can tell me what you think it is, but to me, it's smart, informative, entertaining, and fun. That's what I shoot for anyway. So, and if you have any more tips on how I can do that better, let me know, because I'm always open. So, but just stay true to your natural style, which is me. I stay true to my natural style. Like, it's me. No matter what show you watch me on of my podcasts and shows, I'm still me. This is what you get. And your show needs to reflect you. Don't try to be someone that you're not. Don't try to put on an act that is like not in line with your normal personality. And be really willing to take that feedback so you can be mindful of your audience. And what are your style elements? This is, again, that consistent language, music, catchphrases. These are all the pieces that you really want to focus on. So another thing that people often forget about is what I mentioned earlier, which is like episode naming. And they're like, what are episode naming conventions? No, it's not a conference. Importance of clear naming conventions are so important. It helps in SEO, so people can help find you, and not just you, but specific episodes, or find themed episodes when they know nothing about you. They don't even know to search for you. They don't even know the name of your show, but the name is picked up and comes back in the search results if they are looking for how to properly prepare artichokes, and you are an artichoke expert. And does it look professional? But one of the conventions that people often forget about is numbering the episodes, which is funny because I was just talking to my producer today about this and suggesting maybe we change the uniformity of the style of our numbering, because you want something that's really easy to remember. So, on TV, if you look at reruns, it's like S.2.E.4. So season 2, episode 4. You want something similar like that for your podcasting so that people can always see exactly where it is. The numbering is different from the naming. In my opinion, the numbering is secondary. I don't even think it's essential to have the numbering in your title. I don't usually. I use it more for internal purposes. But if you do want numbering in your title, you need to make sure it's always consistent. Like, is it episode spelled out, or is it EP period? Is it just 8.3, or is it pound, number 8.3? What is that format? Keep that line of numbers and letters and punctuation marks identical each week so that it's at a glance people can see, oh, I've already seen this one, right? And your title, clear, concise description of the content. Don't make it so vague. And even if it's a great and hilarious title, if it's too vague, people won't pick up on it if they're searching. It won't be picked up by SEO. If your hashtags are not clear, if your title isn't clear, they'll probably just miss it. So it's a very fine line between keeping it fun and entertaining and also being exactly what it is or close enough. So like for today's episode, first of all the episodes in this 10-part series are called the Podcast Power Playbook, because this is all part of my Podcast Power Playbook. And so what it would say is the Podcast Power Playbook, how to dominate your niche. Now, what I didn't say today in that title was consistency. Consistency is the element that I'm discussing today. Now, I could have put that in there. That was an option. I made a choice. Consistency, how to dominate your niche, consistency. It could have gone either direction, right? Keep your content consistent. The reason I didn't was because we already had the prefix of the series, the Podcast Power Playbook, how to dominate your niche. But I could have said the Podcast Power Playbook, keep your content consistent. But if you were just browsing through and you weren't searching, it's a kind of a random, I just don't see people in there searching podcast consistency. Like, where does that come up from? But niche, I see them searching that. Dominate, that's a powerful and meaningful word. Dominate your niche, that is how you dominate your world. Okay, so sometimes you have to make a choice. So I kept it attention-getting. I kept it married to the series title, but I didn't make it so long that it went on and on. One more little parenthetical tip for you there. If you make your titles too long, they won't show up on some platforms. It just depends. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, whatever it is, If it's too long, it will only show, maybe when you're clicked on your episode, you could see the whole thing. But if someone's just scanning episode titles or something that's in the feed, it's only going to show X number of first words or a total number of letters. So you want to make sure that the most important information stays at the front, or better yet, that typically your title is short enough to fit in the preview. My standard at the moment is usually making sure that my title, the entire title, fits in the preview view on YouTube. So not when you click in, but in the preview. So if you go to my playlist, for example, and you can see the notes to find where the playlist is, and you click on playlist, you'll see all the thumbnails of recent episodes. And as you scroll down there, I want people in those one-liner spaces that define each episode to be able to see the entire topic, the entire name of that episode, so that they don't just say how to dominate your bleh, right? Or the Podcast Power Playbook, and they can't see. If you have 10 of those in a row, the Podcast Power Playbook, and they can't see the extension, it's not really meaningful, right? So these are those little nitty-gritty things, but I told you that's what this show is about. It's helping you realize how important some of these small details are. And for some of you, you love learning this stuff. You already have podcasts, or you're excited about starting your own. And these are the details that you're going to use to really help rise to the top in a short amount of time. Or if all these details make you want to just hold your ears and close your eyes and I can't, it's too much, I'm overwhelmed, then talk to someone like me who can do it for you. Plug and play style podcasting, where you just get to be the queen, king, or whatever your orientation is of your podcast. And we do all the hard work. So you pick. All right. So going back to, we talked about style, consistency, branding, episode naming, all these things that are really relevant to what makes your show not only stand out, but also stay consistent. How do you stay consistent throughout? In general, be descriptive, be concise, use smart keywords in your titles, and also be careful in your format. Make sure that you have the beginning, middle, end, or the beginning, transition, middle, transition, end, transition. For example, if you have a 5-minute segment every week that's an interview of a guest, not the whole episode, but maybe just interview, put that in the same place. So say you talk for 10 minutes, then you interview a guest for 5 minutes, and then you have some sort of out on the street video, edutainment piece that comes at the end. Always have them in the same order. Don't do the on the street interviewing at the beginning and your talk in the middle and then your guest at the end. Just pick the order that makes the most sense and keep it the same. Again, it pulls people in, lulls them to sleep gently, happily, in their happy space. They know what to expect. They're not shocked. It's not like a totally new podcast experience every time. It's new content with great new information that still helps them feel the same and not be disappointed, and that their expectations are going to be met. So hopefully that helps a lot for you. So I guess that wraps it up. Actually, we sped through today. It was probably me talking way too fast. So, you can change the speed in your viewer or in your listening platform. Most cases, you can make me go really, really fast like this, so I can hardly talk so fast you can even tell what I'm saying. You would make me take 2 times the speed, or you can make me talk really, really slowly. Okay, I'm just in a really goofy mood today. Bear with me. All right, so please encourage your friends to check this out and try these strategies for yourself on your existing podcast. If you're planning your next podcast or a new podcast, remember these elements. They're super, super useful, super helpful. And also, speaking of guests, in the near future, we will be having some really outstanding guests on the show who are going to pass on some of their unique knowledge that's helped them rise to the top in their podcast and in their niche, really helped make them a thought leader in their field. So keep coming back to this place to hear more about how to have a world-class podcast. And my next episode is going to be about engaging your audience. So how do you keep them really engaged? What does that look like? How does that dynamic work? It's one thing to produce content that is consumed, but it's a completely separate conversation about whether you're actually engaged. Just because you have a listener or viewer, That's a step in the right direction, but that is not the full spectrum of what it means to have true engagement that will convert to followers, convert to clients, convert to dollars. That's how you want to know what's different. How do you keep your audience engaged? As always, you can find me right here on whatever platform you are viewing now. We stream live on Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern, 5 GMT. And in the meantime, if you have any of the links of the shows that have already streamed, you can click on those, watch them in the past, go to the playlist that should be in the notes, and share this with someone else who might benefit. So until next time, thank you for being here. Send me your questions. I'm going to do another episode soon where I answer them live on the show. Be well, and we'll see you next time. Bye.